I love finding games that are a few years old that you can get for a really big discount, because if the game is good and it stands the test of time, it's going to be just as much fun playing it today as it was when it first came out. And that's absolutely the case for Firewatch, which came out in 2016. That's like 7 years ago. That's just crazy to think about. But thankfully, because of Father Time, you can usually find this game for a pretty good discount on the Steam store or other platforms. Is it for everybody though? Absolutely not, but let's talk about that a bit. So Firewatch is very much a narrative-based game. It's one of the first games that kicked off this whole walking simulator trend. There's not a whole lot of gameplay, there's no fast reflexes that are required. The game is very much about the narrative, the story, the characters, and the game gives you a good amount of choice for you to be able to play it however you want. The writer for this game came from the Walking Dead Telltale games, which were critically acclaimed for their amazing storytelling, and that's what you're going to get here. This is absolutely a narrative-based game, so that will turn people off, but I would say that I would still recommend this game for people that are maybe trying to dip their toes into that genre. Mostly because it's only about 3 to 4 hours long. It's not that big of a commitment. And for me, I feel like that's the perfect amount of time for games like this. It's like a really long movie. You can usually beat it in about 2 sittings if you play it for about 2 hours at a time. And like I mentioned, if you're getting it for a big discount, it's really not that much of a risk. So what is this game about? Let me tell you about it a little bit. So your main character is Henry, that's who you play as. And in the first 15 minutes of the game, they fill into some backstory that kind of sets the whole game up for you. None of this is spoilers. Again, this is the first 10-15 minutes of the game. So Henry meets his wife at a little bar in Boulder, Colorado. They get married, they get a dog. It's just absolutely adorable. But tragedy hits. It turns out Julia has early onset dementia, which is super rare, I think. So at some point, Julia moves away to her parents' house to be taken care of, and then your character Henry decides to take this job in the middle of Wyoming as a firewatcher. I think that's a job. The game's called Firewatch. So basically what that is you're sitting on a tower and you're just watching for fires. This game takes place in the 80s, so I assume technology has made this job obsolete. That's probably was a job in the 80s. You just make sure there's no forest fires burning down the forest, I guess. So the majority of the game is just you being out there as Henry, doing what you would do if you were a fire watcher in the 80s. There are other Firewatch towers and other people that are also doing this job every summer, and you can communicate with them on the walkie-talkie. There's only one that you communicate with, but theoretically there's more in the game, but you end up having a relationship with one in particular. Her name is Delilah, and the game really consists of your relationship with her, how much you're going to open up and talk about your past relationship, or how much you're not going to talk about it at all and just try to get your mind off it and start a new life. It's kind of up to you. I actually played through the whole game and didn't tell Delilah anything about Julia and the dementia stuff. I just kept it a secret the whole time to see if the game would respect that decision, and it absolutely did. I love when games do this. This is one of the reasons that Baldur's Gate 3 is so popular today, because it's a game that respects your decisions, allows you to play how you want, allows you to pick different dialogue options, and then accounts for it in the game. This is something that I feel like the game industry has totally just turned away from in the past 5 or 6 years. And I think that's mostly because if you're going to do all of these different variables and storylines, it's going to take you like 10 times the amount of time to finish your game than if you just made one. And you can't sell your games for 10 times the amount of a regular game because it took you longer to make. You're still going to only be able to sell it for whatever it's worth, whether it's 20, 30 bucks for an indie game or 60 or 70 bucks for a full AAA title. It doesn't matter how many storylines or how many variables are in there, you still can only sell your game for what it's worth. So that's a huge disincentive for game developers to make games like this. But in 2016, this was kind of the direction games were going. You know, we had all of the BioWare games, Mass Effect, Dragon Age, the Bethesda games, Fallout, Skyrim, all of that stuff was still super popular. And again, like I mentioned, I think that's one of the reasons people really liked Baldur's Gate. Now, I'm not saying Firewatch is at the same level as these other games, but it just reminded me of that time in gaming where I thought we were going to get more of this, and we didn't.
Fuck.
So, why is Firewatch good? Well, like I mentioned, all of the different choices that it gives you. The graphics have this really simple, shell-shaded, but beautiful aesthetic to them. This really helps make the game timeless. You can go back and play Wind Waker and it still looks good. The shell-shade aesthetic is something that has been proven to last the test of time. But the biggest standout in this game is that character Delilah, the one that you're talking with over the radio. The voice actor for Delilah is Cissy Jones. She won a BAFTA award, I think, for this game. And since then, she's been in just about every game that's been out the past 6 or 7 years. This was the game that kicked off that career, and it's really cool to go and look back on it. You know, it's kind of like looking back on actors in their first big role, like maybe Leonardo DiCaprio in Titanic or something like that. And then you can see where that person went from there and how it totally changed their life. I think that's really cool to see. There's definitely a lot more to the narrative and it gets pretty interesting, but I don't really need to say much more. The game's only 3 or 4 hours. I think you know after you played it for about an hour if you're going to want to finish it or not. But I highly recommend playing it, seeing it through. It's definitely worth it. But if you don't have a lot of patience and you like gameplay heavy games, if gameplay is king for you, you probably don't want to play this game. But you know, if you want to try the genre out and you get it for a good price, I'd say give it a shot. Like I mentioned, there's no really any kind of gameplay in it. There's a little bit of puzzle solving, but even that is pretty minimal. I don't think I was ever stuck on anything in this game. Everything's pretty easy to figure out. So my closing thoughts, I think this is a great game. It's really fun. It's not everything that I want in a video game, but it absolutely does a good job at executing what it's trying to do. While I love that the game respected my choices and let me play it how I want to play it, I don't feel like I would need to play it again to see how things turn out differently depending on the dialogue you choose. I feel like my playthrough was my playthrough, and I don't need to see every single thing that the game has to offer, though you can go watch people play it on YouTube. I have a walkthrough, and I think a lot of YouTubers played this game and have Let's Plays of it when it first came out in 2016. So you can see some of the differences there, but this does make me want to search for more games like this. I know there's more indie games, more smaller story-based experiences like this that are out there. I've actually reviewed some of them on the channel, like Alan Wake or State of Mind, and if you know any other games that are like that, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to play more games like this. If I were to give it a number rating, like I said, it's not everything that I want in a game. I would say for me, it's maybe a 7.5, but for what it's trying to do, the execution of it, maybe like a 9 out of 10. Like it does a really good job at what it's trying to do. But what it's trying to do is absolutely not for everybody. So I hope that lets you know whether or not this game is for you. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider subscribing, liking, all that fun stuff. And until next time, I'll see you guys later.